afternoon and welcome to the Albuquerque Film and Music Experience, the virtual edition 2021. We are in day 7, the closing day of the festival and the last few events of this year's festival. And the closing event in our Center Stage Conversation series, and we could not have a better guest to close out the series this year than Buffy Sainte-Marie. And I am so excited to hear this conversation. I know the world is as well. But before we get started, I have to thank our sponsors. It's been a great week, thanks to all of you. So here we go. The AFME Foundation, Albuquerque Film Office and Film Liaison Cindy McCrossan, Albuquerque the Magazine, Bernalillo County Commissioner Stephen Michael Quezada, Breza Terrena Olive Oil, Comcast NBC Universal, Real Solutions Airport Meet and Greet Service, Sunny 505, the Baker Law Group, University of New Mexico Film and Digital Arts, Wells Fargo Advisors and Larry Schwartz, Yamaha Entertainment Group, Jalska Road Productions, and AMP Concerts for this specific event. So before I pass it on to Kira, I just wanted to thank everybody for a great series with all the talent throughout the week. Everything is available online. So please visit AFMXNM.com. Without further ado, Kira Seipler, our Director of Operations. Great week. Thanks to you and Melody. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Ivan. And yes, thank you, Melody Carlisle, our technical director, who has kept us on track all week. Thank you so much for all that you do for us. Before I get started introducing our next guest and moderator, just a quick note that during our next center stage conversation, you will be able to ask questions. All you got to do is put your questions into the chat box and we will make sure to do our very best to get your answers. Also, a quick announcement that we will have our award ceremony later today, 7 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time on Facebook Live. I hope that you can join us then. I'm too excited. I want to get going with this, our next conversation, which is with Buffy Sainte-Marie. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Neal Copperman. Neal launched the AMP House Concert Series soon after moving to Albuquerque in 2000. He has steered AMP from house concerts and a hobby to a sole proprietorship and eventually a nonprofit organization that in a normal year presents over 200 events a year around the state. Neal's goal has always been to see the music he loved in other parts of the country be available in Albuquerque. Neal works full-time as the executive director of AMP and in his spare time works on AMP. He is also on the board of the New Mexico Presenters Alliance, organizes the entertainment for the Santa Fe International Folk Art Market, and helped organize and run Globalquerque from its inception until 2019. He is also active in many civic arts projects around the city. We are so lucky to have Neal today. Welcome, Neal.
Thank you, Kira, and thank you, Ivan, for asking me to have this conversation. It's a real treat for me to be here and be able to talk with Buffy. For 6 decades, Buffy Sainte-Marie has been one of the most recognized Native American artists, presenting many people their first connection with and understanding of Native culture. Her debut 1964 album, It's My Way, put her in the heart of the flourishing folk scene and premiered one of the best-known protest songs ever recorded, Universal Soldier, later a hit for Donovan and Glenn Campbell. In the late 70s, Buffy had an interesting career twist when she joined the cast of Sesame Street for a remarkable 5-year run. Once again, a whole generation learned about Native American life and culture from Buffy. As that wrapped up in 1981, she received an Academy Award for Best Original Song for Up Where We Belong, the theme song from An Officer and a Gentleman. After a 16-year break from recording, Buffy returned with the powerhouse, Coincidence and Likely Stories. I remember buying that CD when it came out. It was a revelation, introducing a new rock and experimental edge to Buffy's musical work that stood solidly alongside the burgeoning indie rock scene. In 1996, she founded the Cradleboard Project that created a curriculum for education from a Native perspective to elementary, middle, and high school students. And in the 2000s, she continues to be active in film, voice work, art, education, and recording important and influential albums. Before we jump into our conversation, we're going to start off with a video. Here's one of Buffy's signature songs, Star Walker. She first recorded it in the 1970s and has recorded it several times since. For anyone who lost track of Buffy after the folk years, Starwalker is a great introduction to Buffy's driving later sound. Welcome to the Albuquerque Film and Media Experience, Buffy Sainte-Marie. Buffy,
Hey,
it's so
Neil.
nice to see you again.
Really? It's been a long time, huh?
It has. It's been a while since you were last here in Albuquerque. I just wanted to jump in and say, like, your career, it's been so amazing, decades and decades of amazing work. But it really seems like right from the start, you had a clear sense of who you were and what you wanted to tell the world and where you wanted to go. Where did that come from?
Oh, gosh. You know, I always describe myself as a musician and a thinker. I'm just like a kindergarten kid. You know, you take kindergarten kids to the beach and they don't need any lessons. They know exactly what to do. They make architecture. They make drama. They use their imaginations. They make stories. They make music. They dance. No lessons and nobody telling them that they have to. So that's kind of where I come from, even as a grown-up. My inspiration comes from the same place it did then. And yet it was strange for me as a child in two ways. Neil,
How's that?
two things that should have been defeating me. In a way, they were saving me. In the first place, when I went to school, I was shunned and shamed in music class because I couldn't learn how to read music. I couldn't learn how to read European notation. So I couldn't be in chorus and I couldn't be in band and I'd get scolded. And then I'd go home and I'd sit down in front of this old rickety piano we had and I'd play the heck out of it. I'd play anything I heard on the radio. I'd play fake Tchaikovsky. So what does that mean? It means that sometimes grown-ups are wrong and kids are right. Sometimes an individual has something that the rest of the world doesn't have, and so the rest of the world doesn't know that it exists. Sometimes you might have a medicine for a pandemic that hasn't yet hit. Sometimes songs are like that. So as a child, here I was being told that my absolute solid reality didn't exist, right? You can't be a musician. And I was also being told you can't be an Indian because there aren't any around here. Oh, there may be a few Navajos over there in Arizona, but in Maine and Massachusetts, where there were indigenous people, most of the public and certainly the educators and people's parents didn't think that there were any. So I had this double experience of being denied things that were ridiculous. People were telling me that black was white. So what it did, I think it gave me a sense in good humor and in good spirit that sometimes the world is just full of it. And sometimes they're just plain ignorant. But you know what? It's not their fault. It's not their fault. They have been miseducated or not educated at all about the things that were real for me, indigeneity and being a natural musician. So it kind of did something that I carried through when I went to the University of Massachusetts and got a teacher's degree. My major was Oriental philosophy, basically world religion. And then I got a teacher's degree. And kind of in the way that I've presented myself in my career, it's almost been like being a teacher who knew that the kids didn't know. They just don't know. And my audiences too, they just didn't know in the 60s when I wrote Now That the Buffalo's Gone. They didn't know that there was a dam being built in Upper New York State, Kinzua Dam, and until they heard the song. So it's all kind of a happy artist story in a way, being denied and erased, or, you know, no, you can't be a musician, you can't be indigenous. When you know securely that that you know something that maybe the rest of the world doesn't know yet, it kind of gives you a little bit, you know, it gives you a sheath for your blade. It gives you a sense of patience and understanding before you go out and cut somebody's idea down or push them away because they're so ignorant. No, as a teacher and as an artist, I think you always have that option maybe to teach. And maybe that's what art is about. You know, the things that the blade can never do, you know, is what art can do.
Oh, that's beautiful. You must have been amazingly self-confident as a kid, because so many people would feel like, you know, if the world is telling you that you're wrong about everything, you know, to feel that you were right and that your vision could stand up to that. I mean, that's pretty powerful.
It should be, but no, it didn't give me self-confidence. Well, maybe, you know, Neil, maybe it did give me enough self-confidence to survive. Because like a lot of kids, indigenous or non-indigenous, boys or girls, there was a lot of pedophilia in my neighborhood, even in the house. There were predators, there were pedophiles, there were bullies all around. And, you know, for indigenous people or other people who live in a rural setting and in small communities, sometimes, you know, we're dealing with things almost, you know, a lot of people would say of the residential experience, you know, survivors have told me that their own parents would say, well, you're not so special, get over it. It happened to all of us, you know, which is obviously kind of a lame military residential school type attitude to have.
Yeah, for sure.
But, you know, a lot of kids go through this, through being bullied. So what I think it did, it gave me great confidence in, well, in the first place, I was just having fun as a musician. So I wasn't getting like showbiz kind of confidence, but I knew that at the end of the day, when those kids were finished bullying me, I know that I could go home to a block of paper and some crayons or a piano or anything that would make noise, pots and pans or blades of grass or eventually a mouth bow. Yeah. I knew that I could entertain myself within myself. So it gave me that. But on the other hand, I was still unable to negotiate things like men, like pedophilia, like predators, like alcoholics, like show business bullies, like, you know, the Harvey Weinstein type. And so I was a girl alone negotiating that, but I had this inner thing with both indigeneity, in which I totally believed and still do, and in this gift that I happen to have, and which I think a lot of kids have, but it kind of gets stomped out of them, you know, when they go to school.
Yeah. Did you grow up in a very, it sounds like you didn't really grow up in a very indigenous area or with much support for that, but you felt a really strong personal connection to it anyway.
Yeah, it was a real white community. There was only one other Indigenous person living there, and he was the mailman. And he was wonderful. He was Narragansett, and nobody had ever heard of his tribe. And my mom, who raised me, I'm adopted. So my mom, who raised me, was part Mi'kmaq, or in those days we called it Micmac. But she was part Mi'kmaq. But you know, Charlie Hill was a real good friend of mine, the late Charlie Hill, comedian. And the way he used to put it, he said, "Oh yeah, we were Indian, but we didn't practice it much," you know, and he kind of relates it to being Catholic and lapsed. But a lot of Indigenous families who live outside of their communities, or certainly children who've been, you know, either kidnapped or adopted away, or whatever our story was, there's a lot of things that go along with that. There's a sense of not knowing who you are. I mean, you don't ever get a horoscope because you don't know what your real birthday is. Somebody made it up. You know, they make it up in a court. The judge decides what your birthday is going to be and make up details. So there is this kind of thing, and it's not just me. That's why I'm telling you this. There's a lot of people who have grown up outside of the Indigenous community it affects us differently, and we approach it a little differently. Oh, by the way, I just have to say thank you and honor you guys and LaDonna and all three. You know, it was just such a beautiful presentation that I watched this morning.
Nice.
LaDonna Harris has just been, you know, again, unusual. I've had an unusual life. LaDonna has had an unusual life. I couldn't possibly have done what LaDonna has done. And I couldn't possibly do what grassroots people at the grassroots level are doing every day, you know, putting up with the whole thing and each other and ourselves, you know. But it's not one little, two little, three little Indians. It's all of us. And many of us have been doing it for our entire lives and have gotten real good at it. And so thank you so much for bringing us together in this way. You know, LaDonna and I have been together for a few times in our lives, and there's never been a moment to talk. Just everybody's so busy.
Yeah, well, hopefully you'll have a chance to connect after this. So that would be great.
Thanks, yes.
Yeah, so it sounds like as you grew up that music and art was, you know, something that you came home to as a sense of play and a sense of getting away from the world, but also finding yourself in everything. I'm really curious how your songs, like how do your songs come about? You know, is it just, you know, an afternoon of play and something develops? How do you write songs and make art?
I'm walking down a street or I'm riding in an airplane, a song pops into my head and I sing it into my phone. I can't read music and I can write a melody line, but I give myself cues as to how to remember songs that come fresh, but they just come fresh from the blue like other songwriters, and I don't think any of us know why. I mean, I got my theories, but it'd take too long and it wouldn't matter anyway.
Yeah, but they just arrive as like a flash, you know, so you have like a chorus or a chunk of a song and then you develop it from that.
Some do. When I was a kid, I'd just sit down and I'd fool around with the keys until something sounded good, and I'd keep doing it and develop it from then. Other times, I got a guitar when I was about 15, I guess. And I didn't know you were supposed to tune it only one way. I thought you were supposed to tune it differently for every song. So I came up with some really unusual tunings, and it gave some of my songs a certain edge, like Codine or Little Wheel Spin and Spin. You know, some of them had a certain edge that not too many people were doing in those days. And I came upon it by accident, probably like a lot of natural guitar players with no lessons come upon it by accident. The old bluesmen from the Delta, you know, from the Mississippi Delta, Joni Mitchell learned a few. Yeah, and she was trying to get into show business and couldn't. I carried her tape around in my purse for months and months and months and played it for every record executive and businessman I knew in show business. They didn't know. No, we don't care. We don't care. Too many Canadians. And eventually I played it for Elliot Roberts, and he went down to see her show, and together they made this incredible career. So show business is a strange place for, as LaDonna was intimating, for ideas that are different from what's coming down from above, whether it's indigenous ideas or an individual artist's ideas. See, for me, the whole idea is that we're always growing and evolving, and we're supposed to. We're not supposed to, oh, when you get to be, when you get your driver's license, you're never going to learn another thing. Or when you get out of high school, you're never going to learn a thing. But for me, it's just the opposite. For me, learning something is like money in the bank. Boy, I tell you, between travel and education, it's really just, for me, that's the most delicious part of life, is learning new things and meeting new people and saying, wow, it wasn't at all like I thought. It's different.
Yeah, it's great. It's great that the world is still fresh and still has a lot to offer and everything. It's a spirit that we should all carry with us. I was obviously, the time you spent on Sesame Street is one of those kind of crazy twists of life. I'm sure nobody would have seen it coming, but it fits perfectly into your interest in music and art and education. Again, sort of unexpected but perfect at the same time. How did that come about, and what did it mean to you?
Well, I didn't have much going in show business in the United States. I was very popular in Europe and Asia. I was playing in Hong Kong and Australia and all over the place. But in the US, I'd already been blacklisted by, Nixon and Johnson both did a hatchet job in my career. So I couldn't get any airplay. And I was performing mostly out of the US, and I'd already moved to Hawaii. So I had a pretty good life. And the phone rang and it was Sesame Street, and they asked me to count from 1 to 10 like Stevie Wonder and everybody else did. And I was really busy having a great life doing the things that I wanted to do. And I was already spending a lot of time in Saskatchewan on the reserve. So I didn't really want to do many show business things, so I turned them down. I said, no, I don't want to do that. But before we hung up, I said, but have you ever done any Native American programming? And they said, no, but we'll get back to you. And they did. They got back to me. And the first place that we went was Taos.
Oh, how funny.
And yeah, you can still see it. It's still on YouTube. And it's so cute because, they are truly child-centered. And the reason why I was really on Sesame Street in the first place was having to do with things that I thought I could give them. I'm really not that much interested in being a celebrity and coming out and doing something, standard. I always like to cover the base that nobody else is covering and to bring something that nobody else is going to bring. With Sesame Street, they never pigeonholed me, even though we started at Taos. They never stereotyped me and, made me the Sesame Street Indian or anything. And we did do some cultural things, and, we had powwow groups come in, etc. But we also did things on sibling rivalry. Very important, and breastfeeding, and for instance, counting. I taught the count how to count in Cree.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and we were just I was just there to do essentially the same thing I was trying to do when I used to be a folk singer in show business before I got kicked out. I was trying to give people something that they didn't get elsewhere. And in this way, not only this way, but in this way, I used my opportunity to be on Sesame Street and reach so many people. I mean, I may have been blacklisted by radio stations and show business, recording industry kind of things, but to reach 3 times a day, 72 countries of the world with messages about sibling rivalry and cultural diversity and breastfeeding. I mean, it was a real honor to even know those people. They're truly child-centered, and I feel as though they did so much. In Canada, that was usually the first place that any of them got to see an Indigenous person on TV was me on Sesame Street talking to Big Bird. And some of them actually saw, when we pulled into Taos, it was me and Big Bird and a bunch of little Indian kids, right? And Big Bird's all antsy, right? And he's riding along in the truck, and he says, Buffy. And I said, what is it, Big Bird? You look kind of nervous. He said, I heard there were Indians around here. And of course, all the Navajo kids and the Taos kids, they all jump up and say, I'm an Indian, I'm Navajo. And so that's the way, I mean, they wrote things and handled things. Some of the stuff I wrote, some of the stuff they wrote, but I never, ever, they never handed me anything that wasn't wonderful. So there is that out in the world.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. And obviously that ties perfectly into your sense of being an educator and your training in that. So it's great that that Sesame Street allowed you to have that voice,
Yes,
you know,
yes.
and super impactful. Really.
Yes. They not only allowed, it wasn't like allowing, they sought it out. They asked all the time. I mean, the segment on breastfeeding, I mean, I suggested that to them. You know, I was kind of like, oh, I don't know what they'll say, but no, they went for it right away. Just like when I suggested that they do some Indigenous programming. So what I say to my Indigenous friends, you know, if you get an opportunity and you don't want to do it the way they're doing it, and you have something even better, give it to them. Cook it up yourself and then prepare to serve them. It's kind of one of my favorite things to say is, some will tell you what you really want ain't on the menu. Don't believe them, don't believe them. Cook it up yourself and then prepare to serve them. And that's what you do with songs. That's what you do with your paintings, your dances, your writings. I mean, it's what LaDonna does in Washington, right? They don't know what the heck they're doing. So she prepares it and then she serves them with it. She doesn't go in and hit people over the head with it. No, no, if you as an artist can perfect something so that you really love it and believe in it and you feel okay about giving it to others, oh, it's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. It feels like that's been part of a lot of what you've done. I mean, obviously your songwriting carries that, and the time on Sesame Street carries that. And the Cradle Board project that you helped found, you know, that different perspective on education is also kind of right in line with the way that you presented, you know, how you presented yourself here on Sesame Street. Do you want to talk a little bit about that education model? Yeah,
I will, because I think it's such a valuable model, but I do need to say that we're not running it right now. So I'm sorry, we can't sign you up. We kind of pulled back when George Bush decided to prioritize philanthropy. I got scared. Anyway, I would love to start it up again. But what we were doing really is, I feel as though there's so much bad news that kids get about Indians, if they get any at all, but they seldom get any of the good news. I mean, even now in Canada, we're dealing with residential schools. I mean, you know, just the horror of exhuming the bodies of children from one after another residential school graveyard, and the kids weren't even identified. You know, it's pretty awful. So also missing and murdered, and just all of the hard to deal with things that Indigenous kids see in the papers, see on television. Let's bring them some good news. When they go to school, everybody at grade 6 is supposed to be studying the principles of sound, now the principles of friction, you know, and things like that. So I decided, why don't we do science through Indigenous eyes? We can do the principles of sound. We don't have to do it through tubas and pianos. Why don't we do a study of Indigenous musical instruments and study the principles of sound through indigeneity? And why don't we give the kids a whole bunch of powwow things to listen to? And how about some Indigenous classical players? And how about some Indigenous jazz players and some pop players? So what we did, we wound up giving kids science, geography, government, all through Indigenous eyes, but without having to impinge on teacher time. Because the kids are still following national content standards at the time. All the kids in grade 6, they already are supposed to be studying the principles of sound. It won't take a minute longer. It'll just be better and more interesting and enriching for everybody. So it was a win-win. I wish I was just turning 40. I'd start it all up again.
I know, you get excited just remembering about it and talking about these ideas. They're beautiful ideas, you know. It's
good. I mean, even the idea, for instance, with all this bad news that Indigenous kids have to deal with, how often do we remind the world that we invented team sports? You watch soccer, you watch shinny, you watch lacrosse, you watch football, you watch basketball, you watch baseball. They were all not only invented, on this side of the water. But the rubber ball, the stadium, the protective equipments like helmets and helmets with animal logos and hip pads and shoulder pads and all. It sounds like the doggone NFL. And we ought to be helping our kids to be in front of that, celebrating it and taking credit for it, because it was not only invented and developed, but it was spread all throughout the Western Hemisphere. The Maya ball game developed into many other things. It didn't just continue to be only the Maya ball game, but like human beings do, we continued to develop, we spread. Cultural diversity is a thing, and we can still do it.
For sure. I'm curious, the pandemic has, been a challenging time, obviously, for everybody, and it's been a time of reevaluating what's important to us, as well as, reconnecting to our own, roots and things that we value. How have you spent the last year and a half? And do you have any cool things to share with us that have been bubbling up? A lot of creative folks, really tapped into their creativity so far during the pandemic.
Well, that's usually my dream come true anyway. With show business, as a concert artist, people think that you're really creative when you're out there on the road, just barely being able to survive, between the travel and the hours and the jet lag. And, it's just a tough life. So I'm always glad when I come home. So I'm very grateful that when the pandemic hit, I wasn't stuck in some foreign country where I didn't know the language and didn't know the money. That could have happened, but I was already at home. So I live on a farm. I really do live in a farm in the middle of nowhere, way in the mountains in Hawaii Island. And people who are stuck in an apartment somewhere, my heart goes out to you, because we can drive each other crazy. We can drive ourselves crazy. I at least have art. So what I've been doing tons of drawings. I've never been very good at drawing. And I always thought, oh, that means I don't have talent. But then my bandmates and I had a concert in Brooklyn, and we decided to go to the Museum of Modern Art, and I looked at a collection of Cézanne's drawings, and when I saw how many times he scratched it out, erased it, and it made me realize that just like playing the guitar, the first time you pick it up, it doesn't come to you. It doesn't mean you lack talent. It means that you just got to try some more. So I've been doing a whole lot of visual art since the pandemic. I haven't been playing guitar much, but as an artist, I can say that, I've had it much better than most people. And what's really killing me is the people at the border. When I turn on the TV and I see all these people at the border, they don't come from Haiti, they don't come from Afghanistan, they're Native American people, they're indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. We do predate all of those freaking nation state borders, and no one has said anything. Come on, New Mexico, wake up. These are Indian people at the border, and nobody even says it. Well, somebody please identify what it is. It's just plain more of the same. And I just don't see any consciousness of this. So if any of you guys know that somebody is already taking this issue on, please let me know, because I feel all alone in this.
Yeah, that's a really interesting challenge and observation. I'm not really sure, I don't have any insights on that myself, but it's an important one for us to be conscious of and be looking into.
Again, it's kind of like an educational thing. I mean, we as Indigenous people in Canada have been taught that, oh, well, that's the US. What? No. The problems that affect Indigenous people, I won't go so far as to say the whole world, just because I don't know that much. But in the Western Hemisphere, even our situations in poverty and indigeneity, I mean, it does exist. And I really feel as though, just like we have been educated out of knowing who we are, we've been educated out of knowing our connection to other Indigenous people in the Western Hemisphere. And, I remember in the 60s when somebody said, oh, they're not Indians, they're Chicanos. And people get very upset about labels. And sometimes in Central America, people won't want to say that they're Indio because somebody has taught them that that is disgraceful. You know, that has kind of a terrible meaning. You know, it's a low class meaning to it. That's it. I don't care what you call it. I see what's going on, and colonialism in bunches we don't ever get a chance. I mean, Black Lives Matter is so important. Afghani refugees is so important. But are we always on the bottom? Are we always at the end of the line? Are we always forgotten? Yes. So come on, artists. Let's wake people up. It's what we can do. We don't have to tear anything down. We don't have to fight with anybody. We can make beautiful art that shows who our people were and are and can be.
Yeah, it seems like so much of the Native art, I'm on some bulletin boards and stuff, I'm constantly seeing contemporary Native art that just totally shows the beauty of the people and the culture and the traditions and the heritages. It's a beautiful world and a beautiful culture, but often overlooked. You know, I didn't encounter it myself really until I moved to New Mexico. When I lived in other parts, I had no experience with Native culture or Native people or anything. It was a complete unknown until I arrived here about 20 years ago, and it kind of opened up a whole new world of people that, you know, were just foreign to my life.
Yeah, but look what you're doing. Yay!
Well, it's been great. I mean, I'm so happy that I know Native American women, lawyers, and medical people, and so many musicians and artists. You know, the culture is incredibly rich, and I've had a great privilege to work with a lot of great Native performing artists. So, you know, there's just tons out there, and there's a lot here in New Mexico. So it's a very rich tradition here. You talked about messages, you know, and when we chatted yesterday, you kind of we talked a little bit about this, that you have these songs you do that are kind of like, you call them anti-protest songs, but they're not really they're not against protesting, you know. So they're sort of more like message music, you know, that you have a number of songs that you've written that you feel like they carry their own messages that aren't necessarily reactive messages. You know, would you like to talk about that song?
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up, Neil. It's interesting because songs like Universal Soldier, or Now That the Buffalo's Gone, or My Country 'Tis of Thy People You're Dying, or Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, you know, these songs are informative, and what they do is they spell out an issue for your examination, and very often have my little point of view in there too, right? So that's what they're doing. But then there's another kind of song that I've been writing along all my life. I'm just the same as I was when I was a kid, all different kinds of songs the same day. And this, there's no name for these songs. I don't know. It's just another kind of activist song, but it's a song that instead of just spelling out a problem, it kind of talks about solutions and enthusiasm and motivation. And a song like You Got to Run, you know, trying against the odds, you're in a trance, say, who did you think you are to have a chance? You're a no one from a place where everyone knows your face, the come and go way, they know the sun. And so you better hang on, and yeah, you better run, because here's your chance and your race has begun. Down in a hole, you feel like two different people in your soul, feel like a loser until you see that as you bend, you learn to be your own best friend, and you learn how, and you learn when to take a chance on the spirit of the wind. And at the end, you know, anyway, this song, You Got to Run, it might be about, I wrote it for a dog sled movie called Atla, Where the Spirit Wins. But I wrote it in the 60s. And nobody was talking like that in the 60s. And there's another one that I wrote in the 60s. Nobody wanted to hear about climate change or supporting nature. Oh, look at the Indians. You protect Mother Nature, right? I mean, there was really a boneheaded attitude even to any of this until quite recently. There's another song. It's called Carry It On. And it says, hold your head up, lift the top of your mind, put your eyes in the earth, lift your heart to your own home planet. What do you see? What is your attitude? Are you here to improve or damn it? Look right now and you see we're only here by the skin of our teeth as it is. So take heart and take care of your link with life. It ain't money that makes the world go round. That's only temporary confusion. It ain't governments that make the people strong. It's the opposite illusion. Look right now and you see they're only here by the skin of their teeth as it is. So take heart and take care of your link with life. It's beautiful if you got the sense to take care of your source of perfection. Mother Nature, she's the daughter of God and the source of all protection. Look right now and you see she's only here by the skin of her teeth as it is. So take heart and take care of your link with life and carry it on, we're saying, and carry it on and keep playing and carry it on and keep praying and carry it on. So I wrote that song, what, 40, 50 years ago, and nobody wanted to hear about that, but now they do. So it's all good news. Eventually, the thing that you made, you might be in the next world by then. That thing that you made that you believed in, and it's just plain a pure reflection of how you see it, it might make a difference to somebody somewhere. So don't ever give up on it.
Beautiful. Carry It On is, that's the one that you worked on with Tanya Tagaq, right?
Oh, yes. When it came time to record that, yes.
Yeah, I'm such a huge fan. And talk about a Native artist with a distinct and dramatic voice. How did you connect with Tanya? What was it like working with her?
Oh gosh, we had met years and years ago, a long time ago in Yellowknife. Tanya, in case somebody doesn't know, she's from the north. She's Inuit, and she's a throat singer. And we met. She was just real young and I was already established. So it was Folk on the Rocks in Yellowknife. And we got to talking, just really liked each other. We both saw each other's uniqueness, I think. I think that's what we saw. Also, we were both women and we knew how it was in showbiz. So we would touch base every now and then, just tangentially. And then Tanya won the Polaris Prize in, I think it was 2014, I think. And then the next year I won it. And the US isn't going to understand this because we don't have anything like that. The Polaris Prize, they give the artist $50,000 check if you win the Polaris Prize. And it's a big, huge panel of judges. I think there are like 200 people involved in the initial submissions. And then it gets narrowed down to fewer submissions and fewer. Anyway, the best album in Canada without regard to sales or airplay or any kind of payola or charts or anything. It's just judged on the music. So the Polaris, once Tanya won, and then I won the next year, and they said, we love it when our Polaris Prize winners collaborate. Is there any of our winners that you'd like to collaborate with? And oh boy, there were some good people. But I chose Tanya and Tanya chose me. And so we did You Got to Run as a duet, and you can hear her. I mean, she's just an amazing throat singer, just tireless. Oh, yeah. You hear her on a lot of Tribe Called Red albums, and you know, everybody wants Tanya to sing on their songs.
Man, those guys just changed their name. What are they now? The
Hallucination.
Hallucination. I can never get it in my head. Yeah, the Hallucination. So.
Yeah. And you know, LaDonna earlier was talking about John Trudell as being having been in one of the Oklahoma groups that she was helping to support. And John's poetry, a lot of us refer to John's poetry. He was so wonderful. Hey, by the way, can I plug a book? I want to plug a book because every third chapter it mentions one of my very best friends in my whole life, Charlie Hill. The book is by Cliff, K-L-I-P-H, Nesterhoff, and it's called We Had a Little Real Estate Problem. And it's about the history of Indigenous comedy, and it's so good. It's just so wonderful. Awesome. I hope to meet him someday.
Yeah, that sounds really hilarious.
Yeah, it is.
So we're starting to take some questions now. So, okay. So Kara just sent me the first question. It comes from Rudy, and Rudy wants to know, are you writing any new songs these days?
Oh gosh, all the time. But for me, writing is like dreaming. You know, you go to bed at night and you don't know if you're going to have a dream or what it's going to be about. So it's always a surprise. So I'm always painting, always drawing, and I get things, you know, I'll just get really into it for a few days. Then I'll have to go someplace and I'll come back to it maybe 2 years later. But so I always have stuff that I'm working on from all different periods of my life, even going through old notebooks and things. Sometimes something that I wrote in the 1950s will turn out to be the second verse of something that I'm writing about right now. So I'm kind of I'm always writing.
Cool. Here's another question from Michelle. What is your opinion of the various media outlets that cover the Indigenous music genre?
Well, we don't have enough, and they're not yet powerful enough to reach as many people as we wish, but I would say more power to them. I mean, I live in Hawaii, and so I'm really away from my community and other people's communities a lot. And I rely on well, Indian Country Today, and I'll listen to podcasts. I'll watch Reservation Dogs. All our young actors, yay, go for it, girls and boys. Yes, yeah. Because I'm talented people, and I'm a big Sterling Harjo fan too. In Canada, we're quite a bit stronger, I think. You know, the US, we're pretty weak in all aspects, I think, except possibly education. In Canada, there are Indians all over the place. You can't pick up any major newspaper without seeing many, many stories that involve Indigenous people, whatever it's about, just ordinary stuff. But we're still such a small minority and so little visible in the US that every one of these outlets, I say thank you, please, and get it right. There is nothing to be compared with accuracy, and nothing is bad if you get it wrong.
It definitely seems, I mean, in Canada, the media is a lot more integrated. You know, I mean, it seems like there's a lot more attention to Native issues, and there's a lot more coverage in mainstream Canadian media.
Oh yeah.
Whereas in the US, it feels like Native media is Native American Calling. It's, you know, Hopi Radio. It's kind of its own circuit that it doesn't really cross over. You know, it seems like that's kind of a real challenge in getting the voices heard.
Yes, it's all good though. I mean, and it's not new either. I mean, even in the 60s, there were little radio stations that were operated or at least hosted by Indigenous people. Tiokasin in Washington State. He was an early interviewer, radio presenter and all. I first met him when he was working at Evergreen State in Washington. And it's not new. Our broadcasters in both Canada and the US have been around for quite a while, but white people don't know, and they control so much of everything. The Black people and the Latino people and the Asian, they don't even get to hear about us, you know. Yeah. But in Canada, it is different. Canada is a very different country, you know. We have a lot to learn from a lot of things in Canada, and I know we don't have time to go on and on, but there are a lot of reasons why it is that way.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot more progressive. This one's a little bit of a long question from Piper Olson. She says, my thesis project is still in process, but I knew I wanted to study your music, specifically focusing on grief. You have a great skill in acknowledging and naming grief and anger, while also giving people, listeners, the tools to move towards healing and empowerment within your songs. Do you think music is important for a healing process? Do you have any thoughts about the power of collective grief being addressed in music, especially to work towards social change?
Oh my gosh, that is such a smart question. And
It'll be
I don't
a good
know.
Thesis.
It's going to be a wonderful thesis, and I'd love to read it. I don't know what I can contribute to that, but it was very beautifully presented. Thanks. I have never specialized in grief, and this is all very personal. Okay, I have no experience or training in grief counseling or anything like that. So just only from me. I think that grief is something that's so personal. It's really hard to advise another person. It just knocks you off your pins, and it's hard even to be able, when you're in a state of grief, you don't even know what would comfort you. You know, it really is as though, you know, somebody kicked over the anthill and everything's going in every direction. You're just really off kilter. I think that some people find music really helpful. But I think it's very personal. I mean, Guns N' Roses and Mozart are two different things, and some people are soothed by one and some people are soothed by another. When it comes to writing about the collective grief in Indian country, I love your question. Maybe sometime we can talk privately, if you guys will hook us up. You know, I wrote a song in the 60s called My Country, 'Tis of Thy People You're Dying. And what I was addressing was just the ignorance of really nice white people who came to see the little Indian girl cry in the coffee house. I mean, there was this somewhat totally ignorant, but almost because of that, almost innocent approach of some people to loathe the poor Indian, you know. And a lot of teachers would come to me and they'd say, where can I find more information? Where is the curriculum? And there is no curriculum. There certainly wasn't then, and I think there still isn't. So I wanted to give them Indian 101 in 5 minutes in this song, My Country, 'Tis of Thy People You're Dying. And I'm glad we're addressing this, because at my website, I have an annotated version of Universal Soldier, but at another website, creeliteracy.org, creeliteracy.org. Solomon Ratt, who's a great Cree speaker, has translated a lot of my songs, and I've written up an annotated version of My Country, 'Tis of Thy People You're Dying, which is just great for high school or beyond levels, explaining what the song is about. But people did not like to hear that song, and I made it bulletproof. I mean, the song now has footnotes. No. If you want to know, for instance, Universal Soldier, I'm not kidding. When it says he's 5'2" and he's 6'4", Buffy the Folk Singer didn't make that up. They were the height parameters in the Vietnam War. So you can almost, as a songwriter, you can almost be like a journalist, but you've got to be accurate. And it's no harder to be accurate than to not be accurate. So My Country, 'Tis of Thy People You're Dying, you can find it at creeliteracy.org, in Cree, in English, and with the annotations in both. So I guess what I'm trying to tell you guys is that some of you are artists and some of you are art supporters and lovers. And I just want you to know that in Indian country, even if you're not seeing it, there are a lot of people doing really significant work. Most of us aren't being paid for that kind of work, but we certainly can use this kind of support that helps to spread public awareness of what each other is doing. And I thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of your work.
Well, thank you, Buffy, for sure. We have another question here. What was it like for you being the first Indigenous person to win the Academy Award?
Thank you for mentioning that, because did you notice when Wes Studi accepted his honorary award, he said that he was the first one to have an Academy Award. So I'm glad somebody remembers.
How quick they forget.
Well, I don't know. Yeah. It was lonesome, and I'm really glad that now at least there's one other Indigenous person at least to get an honorary Academy Award. Welcome, Wes, who certainly deserves it for his body of work, which is of course incredible. Yeah. But it took so long, you know. And the problem, there's some problems, you know. I like the Academy, and I go back and forth, you know, I write back and forth to them with suggestions, and they have been trying to improve their diversity record, and I've been helping with that, or at least trying a little. Bird Running Water, who used to be working with Sundance, now also works with the Academy. And there aren't that many people in the trades or in the big categories like, you know, music and acting and directing, etc. We have these people, but they have not yet been recognized. They haven't gotten a chance to make a feature. They made the best documentary ever, won every award, but they haven't yet had a chance to make a feature, or it hasn't been released. We're way behind. And just like in the music business, there are hundreds of thousands of white people in the white music industry selling that kind of music. There are hundreds of thousands of black people selling black music. There are a whole lot of Latino people selling music in the Latino music industry. We don't have that. We don't have an industry. We don't have a music industry, a film industry. There are scattered business people trying to put it together in a business-like way, but that's not how it happens. You know, it doesn't happen like that. No, it happens like this.
Yeah. In reservation box, things like that.
Yes.
That actually ties in perfectly. The next question that came in is sort of basically like, where would you go to find Indigenous music? What platforms are there for people to discover Indigenous music on?
Oh my goodness, just type it into your browser, Indigenous music, or if you want Native American music or First Nations music, or just Indigenous music Canada, Indigenous music Honduras, Indigenous music Iceland, wherever.
Yeah, I mean, that's been kind of my experience, is that the music is out there, but there's not like these little pocket, communities build, on Facebook, on, Twitter, they build on all of the normal platforms. And all the Native people I know are using all of them.
Yeah, and I recently did one for Sirius. I did one for Spotify. I think I did one for iTunes, but they're out there. Somebody's always asking one of us to make a playlist, and that gives us a chance to, go exploring, kind of breaking the trail and seeing what's out there to pass on to others. And there's a lot of Indigenous music going on. Yeah.
Do you have some new favorites you can tip to people out here?
No, not off the top of my head. No, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay. No worries. Another question that came in is, how do you stay so positive and luminous among the darkness and reality going on in the world?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
You look depressed thinking about how you stay positive.
Combination of boredom and fear. No, I have a very strong faith in that our life is continuous into the next world. I have no proof, and I'm not an evangelist, but I do have that faith. I have always felt that we're not here just, I majored in Oriental philosophy, so I got over reincarnation a long time ago, and I no longer think that happens. But it might. No, but I do believe that we begin here and that we continue into forever if we choose to, and if that's the way we lay things out. Another thing that I have had going for me my whole life that almost everybody I know had to deal with is alcohol. I never got into alcohol. I don't drink. And so I missed a lot of the networking opportunities of, partying and you go out after the show and have a few beer. That was not me. I went home and I wrote songs and had different kinds of fun. So I never got into alcohol or heavy drugs. I was addicted to codeine by a doctor, but again, it was 50 years too early. Everybody gets hooked on doctor drugs now, but I had that experience early and turned it into a song. So I've been through the same crap everybody else goes through. And I really think that it might have something to do with the early upbringing that I mentioned to you, Neil. We talked about a little yesterday and a little today, just the idea of, I feel secure that even if, it doesn't help with people dying in the pandemic at all, but I do know that I can go into myself and be someplace that I love and respect, and that's fun for me, and that keeps me and sometimes other people healthy. So, and I've had that all the time. So I share it the best I can. And I really encourage, like, my nieces and nephews to have the courage to be themselves, to say no to things that just drugs and alcohol that'll ruin their bodies. I encourage people to work out, to stay alive, get off the couch, Buffy, get off the couch, and to, jump around. It's really a lot of common sense. But I think that with so many advertisements for things that don't make any sense come at us, that unless we can pull back to that quiet place, what my Cree dad would have called that sacred spot, if you can pull back into that sacred spot within yourself, you remember the elders that you've known in your life. You remember your friends, whether they're still with you, whether they've gone on. And I think there is a healing inside ourselves that's always there, that no one can take away from ourselves, but we need to encourage each other to spend time there. Need to let each other alone. You're not going to find it in social media.
No, definitely not. We have to bring our own experiences out rather than just, absorbing that stream, that Facebook stream.
Oh yeah, I mean trolls. I mean, I work with young people a lot in Canada, a lot of teenagers and 20-somethings in Canada, trying to help them get into show business through the arts too, because it's hard. Something that I just continually tell people, especially who come from small reserves, these people have been raised in the residential school military bullying thing. They have a life that's been fraught with alcoholism, bullying, abuse, drugs. And sometimes a kid is growing up in that. Sometimes people are growing up in an atmosphere, and it doesn't matter whether they're white or black or brown, they grow up in an atmosphere of bullying, where you are expected to bully, and you better be bullying the right people, and you know what? You can let that go. You don't have to tear it down. You don't have to have a fight. You don't have to insult anybody. You can walk away and not be like that. If you allow yourself to put down the burden of being judgmental, I swear you'll be a happier person. You don't have to correct anybody. If somebody says something and you disagree, you don't have to automatically have a fight over it. You in one ear, out the other, and retain what's wonderful. I mean, I know it sounds very naive. I told you, I think like a kid, and it's to me, it's common sense.
Well, sometimes that naivete. Are you familiar with the artist Valerie June? She's a Black singer. Yeah, we just had her out here, and she's a very, very much sort of this spiritual light kind of person. And she actually talks about naivete because she's a perpetual optimist. Mm-hmm. And she's like, people think I'm naive. Do you know how hard it is to be willfully optimistic in this world? It's not naive, it's a choice. Mm-hmm. It's a choice that I make and follow through every single day, and I thought that was a really beautiful message.
Beautiful, beautiful. And sometimes, sometimes young people coming up, sometimes they really need to get out of town. Sometimes you really need to leave, because especially with artists, once an artist starts getting good, sometimes they attract a lot of trolls, internet trolls, brothers and sisters and cousins, well, who do you think you are to have a chance? You're a no one from a place where everyone knows your face to come and go away. They know the sun. We know who you are, Jesus. We know who you used to be. Sometimes I say, well, you know what? No matter how old you are, try to get into a community college somewhere. Try to get into a place where there's a support system, a roof over your head, learn something and make some new friends. Sometimes that's what you've got to do. And when it comes to being an artist, whether you're a painter or a dancer or a musician or what, play right where you are. Play, try to be a big fish in a small pond. Play for anybody. And if you develop your own following in right where you are, that's where you learn. And if you're doing it well enough and you're expanding in a logical, common sense way, keeping yourself safe and healthy and developing your art, whatever it is, they'll come. But you're the one building the audience first. And if the business guys know that you're able to build an audience, that's what's going to attract them. It's not your song. They don't care. They're tone deaf. It's about the money.
Yeah, it's a business.
Yeah, and it's wonderful. And I'm not putting business people down, but artists don't understand how different it is.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. So one last, this will be the final question here. It actually ties nicely because I know issues are, very much at your heart, and that you want, big part of your career has been bringing up issues and revisiting issues because they still are relevant and important. What do you think about today's approach to issues that are now starting to build momentum, for which you've been fighting, for decades?
Oh God, I'm just glad to have company. It's like Wes finally has an Academy Award. He used to be the only one. It was very lonely. It's been very lonely. I think any person who's really dedicated and in a position to spearhead an issue, I think such people will agree with me. It can be very lonely when you feel like you're the only one. And when you see that other people that you don't even know are thinking the same way, that's pretty encouraging. And but you know what? You have to be able to do it at all levels. You have to be able to do it as a solo. You also have to be able to do it as a duet and as a committee or a group. You have to be able to do them all. And you get different chances in different ways. I'll get an opportunity to say something about something and I haven't even thought about for 2 years, but it's important. Or I'll get an opportunity to make something or make some kind of statement about something that, oh, I've been waiting forever for somebody to ask. You know, so don't get discouraged when the world is not yet with you. Everybody's on their same timetable, and every now and then, you know, you catch a wave. We call it luck, but what it is, it's perseverance. Like the Lakotas would say, perseverance, patience.
Well, it does seem like there are a lot more voices out there, even though we talked a little about how, you know, the mainstream media, it doesn't really embrace a lot of Native culture so much. It feels like there's a lot of great examples of that breaking down, like you mentioned reservation dogs, but also, you know, the attention to the Dakota pipeline and those protests, you know, Deb Haaland's position in the government, Joy Harjo getting her second term as poet laureate, the United States poet laureate. You know, there's a lot of great Native voices out there right now, which is pretty exciting, I think.
Well, there always have been, you know, resistance is not new, artistry is not new. And, but what is new is our opportunity to get together and see each other like this. And, and at the same time, to be reaching out to others. You know, it used to be such a big deal for somebody to be on television or to make a record. And then cassettes came along, you know, and all of a sudden show business guys were offering powwow groups. We can make you a star. We're going to help you make a cassette. You know, I mean, that's kind of the way the world is usually, but to see genuine support for the arts. Hey, you know, I've always wanted to, one time I went to your flamenco festival in Albuquerque.
Oh, really?
Boy, was it good. And I've been longing to come back. One of these days you're going to see me. I'm a closet flamenco dancer, but nobody will ever see me. Yeah. So thank you so much for supporting the arts and, you know, not just the part where I fit in, but.
Well, that's a fantastic festival. I'm sure you'd be welcome at any time.
Thanks.
Well, thank you so much for joining us here at the Albuquerque Film and Media Experience. It's been great to have you. And I know you'll be back in just a little while for the award ceremony later today.
Yes, indeed. And I'd also like to acknowledge the Redfords, Robert and Billy Redford, for their support of the work that we're all trying to do together here. So I'll see you guys in a little while, huh?
Great. Thank you so much, Buffy and Neal. That has been one of the more inspiring center stage conversations I have heard. And I thank you, Buffy, for sharing your light with us. Thank you so much. Stay tuned as we get ready for our next Q&A at 4:35 p.m. And you get another chance to see Buffy tonight during our award ceremony live on Facebook at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Until then, have a great afternoon.